I still remember that afternoon as if it had just happened yesterday. The house was quiet, too quiet, the way it often is when you live alone. My old clock ticked steadily in the corner, reminding me of time passing by, hour after hour, day after day. That day, I wasn't expecting visitors. I had just finished making myself a cup of tea, the steam curling up like soft gray ribbons, when suddenly I heard the doorbell ring. It startled me because it had been weeks since anyone had come by. When I opened the door, I froze. Standing there was my son, my only son, holding a bouquet of fresh flowers. Bright, colorful, carefully wrapped in paper. Roses, lilies, and daisies all mixed together, like a painting come to life. For a moment, my heart softened. He hadn't brought me flowers in years. Not since his father's funeral, when he'd handed me a wilted bunch from the gas station on his way to the service. But now, here he was, smiling, presenting me with something that looked so thoughtful, so loving. "Mom," he said warmly, placing the bouquet in my hands. "These are for you." I blinked, surprised. "For me? What's the occasion?" He chuckled and shrugged. "Do I need an occasion to bring my mother flowers?" I wanted to believe him. I really did. I wanted to think my son had finally come around, that maybe he realized I wasn't going to be here forever, and he wanted to show some appreciation. My heart ached for that kind of connection. I invited him in, and he followed me to the kitchen. I found a vase tucked away in the cupboard and filled it with water, arranging the flowers carefully. They made the room feel alive, colorful, almost as if they had breathed new energy into the space. As I worked, he sat at the kitchen table, watching me closely. Too closely. His eyes weren't just on me, they were studying me, measuring something I couldn't quite identify. At the time, I brushed it off. I told myself, "You're overthinking." He came with flowers. That's a good sign. We sat together for a while, talking about little things. The weather. The neighbors. He asked about my health, whether I was taking my medications, whether the doctor had said anything new. I was touched, though something in his voice felt rehearsed, like lines from a script. Still, I ignored that uneasy feeling. I smiled, I answered his questions, I served him tea and biscuits. It felt almost like old times, when he was younger, when he used to come home from school and sit at that same table, telling me about his day. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt hope. Maybe this was the start of something new between us. Maybe my son wanted to rebuild our relationship. The flowers seemed like a symbol, a peace offering. But looking back now, I realize it was never about the flowers. It was never about me, or reconciliation, or love. It was all a carefully laid stage, the opening act to a performance I didn't yet know I was part of. Because the very next morning, those flowers that sat so beautifully on my table began to look different. Not brighter, not fresher, but darker, like silent witnesses to what was coming. And what was coming was something I could have never imagined. The flowers looked even brighter in the morning light. I woke up early, the way I always do, and walked into the kitchen to make tea. The house smelled faintly of lilies and the floor felt cool under my feet. I set the kettle on the stove and glanced at the vase on the table. For a second, I let myself smile. It was such a simple, beautiful thing, fresh flowers in a quiet kitchen. Then I heard the front door. The latch, the soft scrape, the heavy pause of someone who's not sure whether to call out or just walk in. My heart skipped. He still had a key. I'd never asked for it back. "Morning, Mom," my son said, appearing in the doorway, hair a little messy, face freshly shaved, the same faint aftershave his father used to wear. "You're early," I said, forcing cheer into my voice. "Tea?" He nodded and sat at the table, exactly where he'd sat last night. I pulled another cup from the cupboard and worked calmly. Sugar, 2 spoons. Milk on the side. The kettle hissed and I poured slowly, careful not to spill. I was aware of his eyes on me, assessing, timing, waiting. He didn't say much while I set everything down, just tapped his thumb against the tabletop, a nervous habit from childhood that had never fully left him. We sipped in silence for a few moments. He cleared his throat like he was starting a speech. "How did you sleep?" he asked. "Fine," I said. "The flowers are lovely." "Yeah," he said, glancing at them. "They look good here. Brighten the place up." Another beat of silence. He reached into his backpack and set it on the chair next to him. I noticed his shoulders tense. That was when the feeling returned, the one I'd pushed away yesterday. A prickling at the back of my neck, like a warning you hear but pretend not to. "Mom," he began, and the way he said it, soft, careful, made me sit a little straighter. "Yes?" "You know I don't like asking you for help," he said, eyes slipping to the flowers and back to me. "You know I try to handle things myself." I didn't answer. He took my quiet as permission to continue. "It's been a rough few months," he said. "The business, well, things haven't gone according to plan. Cash flow issues. Clients paying late. You know how it is." I stirred my tea even though it didn't need stirring. I wanted the sound of the spoon to fill the room. "I'm sorry to hear that." He nodded quickly, like that line was a step in a ladder he needed me to climb. "I'm not looking for a handout," he added. "Just a bridge. Something temporary." "What kind of bridge?" His hand slid to the backpack. He unzipped it partway, then stopped, as if he wanted me to beg him not to. He smiled gently, reassuringly, the way people do before they push you toward a cliff and say it's a path. "Before we get into it," he said, "I want you to know I love you. I brought the flowers because I appreciate everything you've done. I'm in a tight spot. And if I don't fix it this week, it gets ugly. Like, really ugly." My chest tightened. "Ugly how?" "Default, lawsuits, maybe even bankruptcy," he said, eyes flicking away. "It won't just ruin me. It'll follow me for years. It'll mess with my credit, my work, my everything." I watched him. He was not a boy. He was a grown man with choices. But in the tilt of his head, I saw the child he used to be, the one who scraped his knee and ran to me with widened eyes. He knew what that memory did to me. He had always known. "What are you asking for?" I said quietly. He opened the bag and pulled out a folder. A neat, glossy folder, the kind banks use when they want you to feel safe. He slid it across the table, the edge catching on the tablecloth. "Just a signature," he said. "Two, actually. It's a line of credit secured against the house. Only for a few months. I'll pay the interest. I'll handle the payments. I just need your name, and it unlocks the funds." I didn't touch the folder. I kept my hands around my tea, warming my fingers. My son kept talking, words rushing now that the thing had been placed between us like a sharp object wrapped in ribbon. "I talked to a guy. He said it's super common. People do it all the time, family helps family. It's not like you'd be giving me money. It's just unlocking what's already there. You've got all that equity sitting like a rock. This would put it to work." I stared at the flowers. Daisies, lilies, roses. Petals like soft skin. I thought of how quickly something beautiful wilts when it's been cut from its roots. "You want me to put the house up as collateral," I said. "Temporarily," he said, quickly. "Just until we get past this. You won't even feel it. And I'll make sure you're protected." Protected. The word crawled over my skin. "I have savings," I said, carefully. "Why not ask for a small loan instead? Something we can put in writing." He shook his head. "It's not enough. I need a larger buffer. And banks like security. This way, it's clean. Transparent. He'd practiced that answer. I could hear the polish on it. He leaned forward and softened his voice. Mom, you know I wouldn't ask if I had any other choice. I've tried everything. Investors, friends, even selling my car. This is the only way to keep the business afloat. It's not just about me, it's my employees, their families. If we close, they're on the street. Guilt. He laid it on the table like another document for me to sign. I placed my cup down and finally opened the folder. Pages and pages. Fine print like a net. Numbers that looked friendly until you read where they led. I turned one page, then another. There it was, my address, the house deed reference, interest terms that changed after a few months, steeper, hungrier. Who prepared these? I asked. A consultant, he said, a little too quickly. A guy who handles these all the time. A name? He gave me one. I tucked it away in my mind. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I didn't pull away, but my fingers didn't respond either. I know this is a lot to ask, he said. But you've always believed in me. You've always said I could do anything. I just need you to believe in me one more time. Believe. Another word turned into a tool. I looked at my son, his familiar face, his hopeful eyes. I remembered birthdays and hospital rooms and school assemblies. I remembered sitting alone in the same kitchen when he stopped calling for months, when I heard about his big plans from other people, when I learned to fill my days with small routines so I wouldn't feel the weight of the silence he left. Why yesterday? I asked quietly. Why the flowers? He smiled, faintly embarrassed. Because I wanted to make it special. I wanted to remind you how much you mean to me. Or soften me, I said. Something flickered in his eyes. He sat back. The air shifted. Mom, I'm not manipulating you, he said, tone tightening. I'm trying to talk to you like an adult. We have a real situation. I need a real solution. And if I say no? He hesitated, and there it was, the sliver of truth I'd been waiting for. Then I don't know what happens, he said. I might lose everything. And I don't think you want that for your son. I closed the folder and slid it back toward him. He didn't touch it. I'm not signing anything today, I said. His jaw twitched. Today is the deadline. I'm not signing anything today, I repeated. If this is a good plan, it will still be a good plan tomorrow. I'll have a lawyer look at it. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. A lawyer? Come on, Mom. Lawyers make things complicated. They drag their feet. I told you, I need this now. That's your timeline, I said, steady now. Not mine. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The kettle clicked softly as it cooled. Outside, a bird landed on the ledge and then flew away, startled by nothing. He leaned in, voice low, almost pleading. Please, just trust me. Trust. The most expensive word in the world. I looked at the flowers and felt something inside me settle. A quiet, heavy understanding. I do love you, I said. And because I love you, I have to be careful. I've spent a lifetime cleaning up after men who said they were doing their best. Your father, your grandfather, my brothers. I won't do it anymore. Not blindly. He stiffened. So that's it? That's it for today, I said. Leave the papers. I'll read them thoroughly. If it's reasonable, we'll talk. If it's not, we won't. He stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. Then slowly, he pushed the folder toward me. Fine, he said. Read it. But don't take too long. He stood, shouldered his bag, and hesitated by the vase. He touched a petal with his fingertip, almost tender. Then he left without another word. I waited until the door shut. The silence felt heavier now, layered with the echo of what he didn't say. I carried the folder to my desk, sat down, and began to read, line by line, clause by clause, until my eyes ached and the truth sharpened into focus. This wasn't a bridge. It was a trap. And if I stepped onto it, I would be the one to fall. I closed the folder and placed it beside the flowers. The bouquet looked different in that moment, still beautiful, but suddenly cold. A decoration on a stage I hadn't agreed to stand on. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in months. "Hello, Harriet?" "It's me." I paused. "I need you to take a look at something. Today." As I waited for her answer, I glanced at the door my son had just walked through and felt a strange mixture of grief and clarity wash over me. The next time he came back, I promised myself I would be ready, not to sign, but to see. Not to be softened, but to stand. The kettle ticked again, like a clock reminding me of who I used to be, and who I had to become now. The flowers didn't move, but the room had shifted. And so had I. The days that followed were uneasy. My house no longer felt like my own. Every time the doorbell rang, every time the phone buzzed, I braced myself. I knew it would be him. My son had planted something in the air that wouldn't leave: expectation, urgency, a demand he dressed up as necessity. And I wasn't wrong. The very next morning, before I'd even finished my coffee, the phone rang. His number lit up the screen. My stomach twisted. I almost let it go to voicemail, but a mother's instinct betrayed me. I answered. "Morning, Mom," he said, too cheerful. "So, did you get a chance to look at the papers?" I hesitated. "I've read some." And I told you, I'll have a lawyer review them." He sighed sharply, and for a moment the mask slipped. "Mom, we don't have time for that. You're overcomplicating things. It's just a signature. You could fix this in 10 seconds and save me months of headaches." 10 seconds, I repeated softly. That's all it would take to put everything I own at risk. There was silence on his end. Then, colder, "Do you really think I'd let anything happen to you?" I wanted to believe that. But the folder on my desk, heavy with hidden traps, told me otherwise. "I need time," I said firmly. "That's final." He muttered something under his breath. I caught only a word: selfish. Before I could respond, he hung up. That week, the pressure began to mount. He showed up unannounced 3 times. Each time, the flowers on my table seemed to wither a little more, their petals drooping like silent warnings. On Tuesday, he came in pacing, his phone buzzing constantly. "Mom, I can't stall my investors forever," he said. "They need assurance. If you just sign, I can secure everything. Otherwise, it all falls apart." "I told you." "I know what you told me," he snapped, his voice echoing against the kitchen tiles. Then, catching himself, he forced a smile. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to yell. I'm just under a lot of pressure. You don't understand what it's like having employees who depend on you. Families. Kids. If I go under, they go under too. And their blood will be on my hands." He pressed his palm to his chest as though carrying the weight of the world. I saw the performance in it, but still, it hurt. Because beneath the performance, I could hear the truth: he didn't care about them either. He only cared about himself. By Thursday, his tone shifted again, this time to guilt. He arrived with groceries, bags filled with things I hadn't asked for: milk, bread, fruit. He set them on the counter as though he were a dutiful son, caring for his aging mother. "See," he said softly. "I'm here for you. Always. I take care of you." All I'm asking is for you to take care of me too. I felt my throat tighten. I take care of you. He said it so easily, as if my entire life hadn't been built on the sacrifices I made for him, nights I went without sleep, years I spent working 2 jobs, meals I skipped so he could eat. He leaned closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. You always said family comes first. Don't prove yourself a liar now. The words struck harder than a slap. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the distant sound of cars on the road. My house felt smaller, as though the walls were closing in on me. Everywhere I looked, I saw the flowers. On the table. Reflected in the window at night. Their scent lingered even in my bedroom, faint but inescapable. They were no longer a gift. They were a reminder, a silent voice saying, he will not stop until he gets what he wants. By Friday, he stopped pretending. He stormed in just after lunch, his face tight, his words clipped. He didn't sit down. He stood over me as I sat at the kitchen table, papers still lying untouched between us. Mom, he said, I need you to stop dragging this out. You think you're protecting yourself, but you're not. You're making this worse. Worse for who? I asked calmly. For me, he exploded. His fist hit the table, rattling the vase. Water sloshed over the rim, dripping onto the wood. The flowers trembled violently before settling again, fragile and bruised. I stared at him, unflinching. So this was never about me at all. He blinked, startled by my composure. For the first time, he looked uncertain. I leaned back in my chair. You brought me flowers not because you love me, but because you needed to soften me. You called me not because you care about my health, but because you needed leverage. And now you're standing here in my kitchen, yelling at me like a spoiled child, because the word no doesn't fit into your world. His mouth opened, but no words came. I stood, slowly, deliberately, and looked him in the eye. You want me to risk everything I've built, everything I've worked for, so you can cover your mistakes. And you think bullying me will make me bend. But you've forgotten something. What's that? He muttered, his voice quieter now. I am not afraid of you. For a long moment, we just stood there. The air was thick with unspoken things. Then, without another word, he grabbed his papers, shoved them into his bag, and left. The door slammed so hard the walls shook. When the silence returned, I sank into my chair, trembling. My hands shook, but not from fear, from rage. Rage at his arrogance, his manipulation, his belief that I was weak enough to break. I looked at the flowers again. Their petals had started to curl, their edges browned. They looked tired. Spent. Exactly how I felt. But underneath the exhaustion, a spark lit. A small, steady flame. If he thought he could pressure me into submission, he was about to learn just how strong his mother truly was. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The silence after his outburst didn't last long. By the weekend, his voice was back in my house, if not in person, then through the phone, the messages, the whispers that traveled through the family like poison in water. It started on Saturday morning. My sister called me, her tone unusually cautious. Hey, I just spoke with Michael, she said slowly. He tells me you're being difficult? Difficult? I asked, though I already knew. He says you won't help him. That you're letting him drown when you could throw him a lifeline. My stomach clenched. He told you that? He's your son, she said, her voice lowering to a plea. He made some mistakes, but he's trying. Don't make this harder than it has to be. He said it's just paperwork. Nothing serious. Nothing serious. The words dripped with irony. Signing away my home, my entire security, was nothing serious in his version of the story. I closed my eyes. It is serious. More serious than you realize. Please, don't involve yourself. But it was too late. He had already planted the seeds. By Sunday, the calls multiplied. My daughter-in-law phoned, her voice dripping with manufactured sweetness. "Hi, Mom," she said, almost chirpy. "Listen, Michael told me you're hesitating. I don't know if you realize, but this affects all of us. The kids too. If the business goes under, do you really want to see your grandsons suffer? Do you want them to lose their home? Their school?" My throat tightened. The children. Of course. He had gone there. They're innocent, she pressed on. They don't deserve to pay the price for adult mistakes. And you're in a position to save them. Isn't that what a grandmother does? Her words stabbed me in places only family can reach. The thought of my grandchildren looking at me with disappointment, of them whispering "Grandma let Daddy fail," burned like acid. But another thought pressed harder. Was it really me failing them, or was it their father dragging them down with him? I bit my tongue until I tasted iron. "I love those boys," I whispered. "But I won't be blackmailed into a decision that could destroy me." Her cheerful tone vanished. "So that's how it is," she said coldly, before hanging up. By Monday, even my oldest friend Janet had heard. She called, hesitant. "I ran into Michael at the store," she said. "He looked awful, said you were shutting him out." "Honey, are you sure you're not being too harsh? You always said he was your pride and joy." Pride and joy. The words sounded like a cruel joke now. That night, I sat alone in the living room, the flowers on the table nearly dead, their petals scattered across the wood like tiny corpses. The house smelled faintly sour, the way flowers do when they've outstayed their welcome. I thought about throwing them out, but something in me decided to leave them there, let them decay, let them mirror the truth of what was happening. By Tuesday, he came again. This time, he didn't bother with charm. He brought my grandsons with him. 2 boys, all innocence and wide eyes, holding little drawings they had made for me. "Grandma," they cried, running into my arms. I hugged them, heart aching, tears stinging my eyes. Children don't understand manipulation. They only understand love. But then my son leaned in, speaking low enough for only me to hear. "You see? They need this. Do you really want to look into their faces and tell them you're the reason they won't have a future?" My body went cold. I pulled back and looked at him. His smile was wide, his eyes cold. He was using them like props, like shields, parading them as pawns in his desperate game. For a moment, rage threatened to swallow me whole. But I forced myself to stay calm, not to let him see me break. I kissed my grandsons' heads, gave them cookies from the jar, and sent them to play in the living room. Then I turned to him. "You crossed a line bringing them here. They're my kids," he said with a shrug. "And this affects them too. Don't act like your choices exist in a vacuum." "My choices?" My voice trembled, but not with fear, with fury. "It's your choices that put them in this position. Not mine." His smile faltered. For a second, I saw the mask slip again, the desperation underneath, the ugly truth. But he recovered quickly. "You'll see," he said coldly, standing. "When this all falls apart, you'll wish you'd helped. And when the boys ask why, I'll tell them the truth, that their grandmother turned her back on us." He gathered the children, kissed my cheek in a mockery of affection, and left. The door shut, and I sank into the chair, shaking. Not because I believed him, but because I finally saw the depths he was willing to sink to. He had no shame left. No conscience. And if I didn't act soon, he would drag me into his pit. That night, I picked up the dead bouquet. One by one, I pulled the flowers from the vase, petals falling like whispers of betrayal. I carried them outside, dropped them into the trash, and wiped my hands clean. When I came back inside, the table felt different, bare, yes, but also clearer. I whispered to myself, a vow spoken into the empty room. This ends on my terms. Not his. The stage was set. He thought he was the puppeteer, pulling strings of guilt and love. But he didn't realize something. I had cut the strings. And soon, he would see what it felt like to fall. The night after he brought the children, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, innocent, trusting, woven into his lies like bait on a hook. My heart ached for them, but my anger burned hotter. I sat at my desk, the folder of documents still resting where he'd left it. For days I had been too afraid to look closely. But now, something inside me hardened. If he wanted to manipulate me with half-truths and guilt, then I would arm myself with the one thing he feared most, the full truth. I opened the folder. This time, I didn't skim. I read. Every page, every clause, every number that bled ink like poison. And what I found made my stomach twist. Hidden among the neat tables and carefully arranged language were terms that no son would ever push on his mother if he loved her. Ballooning interest rates after 6 months. Penalties for early withdrawal that would tie up my property for years. Legal jargon that would transfer power of attorney for certain assets he had no right to touch. This wasn't just a loan. It was a trap. A leash. The flowers had been camouflage. The sweet words, distractions. What he wanted wasn't help, it was control. I pushed the papers aside and went to my filing cabinet, pulling out old letters, bank statements, and notes I'd saved from conversations over the years. I needed to see the bigger picture. I remembered him bragging once at a family dinner about a big investment he was making. A new business venture, he'd called it. I'd thought it was bluster at the time, but now I wondered. I turned on my computer, pulled up public records, and began searching. And there it was. His name tied to a company that had been dissolved 6 months earlier. Another registered only weeks ago, already behind on taxes. Lawsuits filed in small claims court. Creditors circling like vultures. But worst of all, gambling debts. I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my chest. Transactions tied to casinos, online betting platforms, even payday loans. Thousands upon thousands of dollars, money that could never be justified by bad clients or cash flow issues. He hadn't come to me as a last resort. He had burned through every other option first, investors, friends, lenders, and strangers, and when there was nothing left, he turned to me. His mother. The one person he thought too soft to say no. By the time the sun rose, I felt sick. Not from exhaustion, but from the weight of betrayal. How many times had I told myself he just needed a chance? How many years had I defended him, excused him, smoothed over his mistakes? How many times had I pulled him out of the fire only for him to run straight back into it? And now he was willing to set fire to my life, my home, my safety, my peace, just to fuel his addiction. I pressed my hands to my face and let the tears fall. Not because I pitied him, but because I finally saw him clearly. The son I loved was buried beneath greed and recklessness, and I didn't know if he'd ever come back. Later that morning, I called Harriet, my lawyer, the woman I'd trusted for years. She listened quietly as I explained, her voice steady but sharp when she answered. "You did the right thing by not signing," she said firmly. "These documents are predatory. If you had agreed, you could have lost everything within a year." I swallowed hard. So I wasn't imagining it. "No," she said. "You were being targeted. And from the looks of it, not just by him. Whoever prepared these knows exactly what they're doing. They're counting on your love for your son to blind you. Blind me. Yes. That had always been the weapon he used best." "What should I do?" I whispered. "First," she said, "we secure your assets. Lock down your accounts. Update your will and power of attorney so no one can forge or contest them. Second, we start documenting everything, his requests, his visits, his calls. If he pushes harder, we'll be ready. Her voice gave me something I hadn't felt in weeks, strength. I agreed, and when I hung up, I felt lighter. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting. I was preparing. That evening, my son came again. He walked in with that practiced smile, holding a pie from the bakery down the street as if sweets could cover the stench of his lies. "How's my favorite mom?" he asked brightly, setting the box on the counter. I didn't answer. Instead, I looked at him with new eyes. Not as a mother blinded by hope, but as a woman who had seen the evidence. I saw the twitch in his jaw, the way his hands fidgeted when he thought I wasn't looking. I heard the rehearsed rhythm in his words. "Did you read the papers?" he asked casually, pouring himself coffee without waiting for permission. "I did," I said evenly. "And?" He leaned against the counter, smiling. I let the silence stretch before I answered. "And I know what they really are." For the briefest second, his face faltered. Then the mask snapped back in place. "Mom, come on. Don't overthink this. It's standard. Everybody does it." "No," I said quietly. "Everybody doesn't. But you would gamble with my life the way you've gambled with your own." His smile froze. His eyes narrowed. "Where did you hear that?" he asked sharply. "I don't need to hear. I can see. Bank statements don't lie. Court records don't lie. You've already lost everything else. You won't take me down with you." The color drained from his face, then returned in a rush of anger. "You've been digging into my business?" "No," I said. "I've been protecting mine." The room went still. For the first time, the power shifted. He realized I wasn't the fragile mother he thought he could corner. I was someone who knew the truth, and the truth stripped him bare. He slammed his cup down on the counter. Coffee splashed across the wood. "You think you're so smart," he spat. "But without me, you'll die alone in this house. Remember that." Then he stormed out, the door shaking in its frame. I stood there, heart racing, but not afraid. Not anymore. Because now I had what he didn't, knowledge. And knowledge was power. As I cleaned the spilled coffee, I thought of Harriet's words, "Document everything." So I picked up a pen, opened a notebook, and wrote down every word he had said. Every threat. Every lie. Every manipulation. This was no longer just a family struggle. This was a war. And I had just armed myself. After that confrontation, I knew one thing for certain: my son would not stop. The shame on his face, the rage in his voice, it wasn't the kind of defeat that made a man retreat. It was the kind that made him plot harder, push stronger, scheme deeper. If I wanted to survive this, I had to be 2 steps ahead. So I began to plan. Quietly. Silently. As if every move I made had to be hidden behind a curtain, because in truth, it did. The first step was Harriet. My lawyer came to the house that week, bringing folders thicker than the one my son had given me. Together, we sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he had slammed his fist only days before, and laid out my defenses. We updated my will. We restructured my bank accounts so no one but me could touch them. We set up alerts for suspicious activity. She even arranged for a forensic accountant to track any attempt to access my assets without my permission. "Think of it like locking every door and window," she said, tapping the stack of papers. "If he tries to get in, we'll hear the glass break." I signed everything with steady hands. For the first time, the pen didn't feel like a weapon pointed at me, it felt like armor. The second step was subtlety. I couldn't let my son know I was onto him completely. If I confronted him now, he'd only get desperate, reckless. He had to believe I was still on the fence, still swayed by guilt and love. So when he called, I answered. When he visited, I made tea. I listened, nodded, even smiled at the right moments. I didn't argue. I didn't resist. I let him think his manipulation still worked, that he was wearing me down. But while he talked, I watched. I memorized the names he dropped, the consultants he mentioned, the supposed deadlines he claimed were looming. Every word he gave me became another piece of evidence for the file Harriet and I were building. It was a strange performance, me pretending to be weak so I could stay strong. But it worked. The third step was allies. I reached out to my old friend Janet, the one he had cornered at the store. I invited her to lunch, looked her in the eye, and told her the truth. Not the sugar-coated version my son had spread, but the raw facts. The debts. The lies. The trap. She gasped, covering her mouth. Oh my God, I had no idea. He made it sound like you were just being cruel. That's how he wants it to look, I said. But I need you to see me clearly. Because when the storm comes, and it will, I need people who know the truth. Janet squeezed my hand. You're not alone. One by one, I began planting seeds with other trusted friends and relatives. Not gossip. Just quiet truth. Enough to make sure that when he eventually tried to smear me again, his words would fall on skeptical ears. But perhaps the hardest step was the one inside myself. I had to harden. For years, I had been the mother who excused him, who hoped, who forgave. Even when he broke my heart, I clung to the memory of the little boy he used to be, the boy who ran to me with scraped knees, who made me cards in crayon, who once whispered, "I'll always take care of you, Mom." But that boy was gone. The man standing in my kitchen was someone else entirely. And if I wanted to survive him, I had to stop confusing the two. So each night, I sat at my desk with my notebook, writing down everything. Every call. Every visit. Every word that cut like a knife. It was my way of sharpening myself, of reminding myself of the stakes. Every page I filled was another brick in the wall I was building between us. One evening, he came over with dinner takeout, his attempt at playing the dutiful son again. We ate together, the smell of fried rice filling the kitchen. He laughed, told stories, tried to slip in mentions of the papers as though they were casual, harmless. Once this is all behind us, Mom, you'll see how grateful I am. You'll be proud again. You'll tell everyone how you believed in me when no one else did. I smiled softly, nodding, playing my role. Of course, dear. But in my head, the words repeated like a drumbeat, I believe in myself now. Not you. When he left that night, I watched from the window as he walked down the path. His phone glowed in his hand, his voice sharp as he argued with someone I couldn't hear. His shoulders hunched, his gestures frantic. It struck me then, he wasn't the confident man he pretended to be. He was cornered. And cornered men were dangerous. That was why I couldn't strike yet. Not until everything was in place. By the end of the week, the house felt different. Not lighter, but stronger. The flowers were gone, replaced with neat stacks of legal documents, updated accounts, and notes in my own handwriting. Everywhere I looked, I saw traces of my silent plan taking shape. The kitchen table wasn't just where he tried to break me, it was now where I had built my defense. I knew the storm was coming. He would not accept my silence as an answer. He would push harder, maybe even cross lines I hadn't yet imagined. But I was ready. I had sealed the cracks. I had gathered allies. I had armored my life. And when the time came, I would not only resist him. I would end this on my terms. That night, as I turned off the lights and walked through the quiet house, I paused at the front door. I touched the lock, feeling its weight beneath my fingers. For years, I had thought of this place as fragile, easily invaded by the chaos my son carried with him. But now, I realized, it wasn't just a house. It was my fortress. And I was its keeper. When he came back, and I knew he would, I would be waiting. Not with flowers. Not with fear. But with truth sharper than any blade he could wield. It happened on a Thursday night. I had just settled into my chair with a book, the kind of small comfort that had become precious in these tense weeks. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet I used to cherish but now wore like a fragile shield. I sipped my tea, turned a page, then heard it. The sound of my front door unlocking. My heart slammed against my ribs. I knew that sound. He still had a key. Before I could even stand, the door swung open, and there he was, my son, stepping inside without knocking, without calling, without permission. His face was tight, pale, his eyes sharp in a way that made the room colder. "Evening, Mom," he said flatly, closing the door behind him. I forced calm into my voice. "What are you doing here at this hour?" He dropped his bag on the floor with a thud. "We're past the point of waiting. I told you I needed this signed, and you're dragging your feet. So tonight, we settle it." He pulled out the folder, the same folder I had locked in my desk drawer. My blood ran cold. He must have taken it while pretending to use the bathroom during his last visit. "You went through my things," I whispered. He smirked. "I knew you'd never give it back willingly. You left me no choice." I tried to keep my voice steady. "That's theft." "No," he snapped. "That's survival. You don't get it, Mom. I'm drowning. You're standing on the shore, watching me go under, and you're clutching the life raft like it's a souvenir. Do you really want your son to sink? Do you want your grandkids to suffer? You can end this right now, with one signature." He slapped the folder onto the table, sliding a pen across the wood. "Sign it." I stared at him. This wasn't desperation anymore. It was coercion. His voice was no longer pleading, it was commanding, sharp as glass. I shook my head slowly. "No." Something inside him snapped. His hand slammed down on the table so hard the teacup rattled and tipped, spilling across the pages of my book. "Do you think you're better than me?" he shouted. "Sitting here in your little fortress, acting like you've got all the answers? You don't know what it's like out there. You don't know the pressure I'm under. But you'll find out. If you don't sign this, Mom, you'll regret it. I swear you will." His voice cracked, half fury, half panic. For the first time, I saw the raw truth beneath the mask. He wasn't in control. He was desperate, cornered. I stood, my hands trembling, not from fear, but from rage. "You broke into my house," I said. "You stole from me. You're threatening me in my own kitchen. And you dare to call this love?" He flinched, then straightened, jaw tight. "This is love. You're my mother. You're supposed to protect me, to support me. You don't just turn your back when things get hard." I shook my head. "No. Love doesn't demand I risk everything I have while you throw your life away. Love doesn't break into my home. Love doesn't blackmail me with my grandchildren." His face darkened, twisted with something almost unrecognizable. "Fine," he hissed. "If you won't sign, I'll find another way." And then, God help me, he pulled out a forged document. My signature already scrawled at the bottom in shaky ink. My knees nearly buckled. "You forged my name," I whispered. He smirked. "Don't act so shocked. You are going to sign eventually. I just help speed things up." My stomach churned. "That's fraud. That's a crime." He leaned closer, his breath hot, his eyes blazing. "And who's going to believe you, Mom? A frail old woman claiming her own son forged her signature? The bank? The court? They'll laugh in your face. By the time you figure it out, the money will already be gone." For a moment, the room swayed around me. I felt the weight of years pressing down, of every sacrifice, every sleepless night I had spent raising him, only for him to stand before me now, my child, my blood, as my enemy. But then I remembered the notebook on my desk. The dates. The times. The words I had written down. The evidence Harriet had told me to gather. And suddenly, I wasn't the weak old woman he thought I was. I straightened, met his eyes, and said, "You've already lost, Michael." His smirk faltered. "What? You think you're clever, but every lie, every threat, every forgery, you've left a trail. And I've been documenting all of it. Harriet has copies. Friends know the truth. You're not half as untouchable as you think." For the first time, he looked afraid. I stepped closer, my voice low but firm. "You may have taken my key. You may have stolen my papers. But you will never take my will. I am not your victim. Not anymore." He opened his mouth, but no words came. His hands clenched into fists, trembling with rage he couldn't release. Then, without another word, he shoved the folder back into his bag and stormed out the door, slamming it so hard the glass rattled in its frame. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there for a long time, my chest heaving, my hands gripping the back of the chair to steady myself. I looked around the kitchen, the spilled tea, the scattered papers, the door still vibrating from his exit. And I realized something had shifted. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. This was betrayal, plain and simple. And betrayal had consequences. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I sat at my desk, opened my notebook, and wrote down every detail of what had just happened. His words. His threats. The forged document. Then I called Harriet. When she picked up, I said only one thing. "It's time to move forward." Because now the battle lines had been drawn. He had declared war on me. And I was done playing defense. It was Harriet's idea to gather everyone. She said, "If you want this to end, you can't fight him in whispers. You have to bring his secrets into the light." And so, one gray afternoon, I found myself sitting in my living room with the people who had been dragged into his games, my sister, my daughter-in-law, my oldest friend Janet, and Harriet at my side with her crisp folder of evidence. When my son arrived, he walked in with that same practiced smile, confident as ever. He looked around at the faces waiting for him, only hesitating for a heartbeat before recovering. "What's all this?" he asked lightly, setting his bag down. "An intervention? Or just a family meeting?" "Sit down," Harriet said firmly. He smirked. "And who are you?" "I'm your mother's attorney," she replied, unflinching. "And today, we're going to clear a few things up." For a moment, he looked unsettled. But then he laughed, running a hand through his hair. "Oh, come on, Mom. Is this really necessary? You had to drag half the family into this because you don't trust me?" I looked at him steadily. "I trusted you longer than I should have." The room went quiet. Harriet opened her folder, laying out the papers on the coffee table, copies of the documents he'd tried to make me sign, and the forged version with my signature. "This," she said sharply, tapping the forged page, "is a crime. Forgery, fraud, attempted coercion. And I have testimony that you attempted to pressure your mother repeatedly into signing over her property." My son's face tightened, but he forced a scoff. "This is ridiculous. She must have signed that herself and forgot." "She's been..." "Careful," Harriet cut in, her eyes narrowing. "If you try to claim she's incompetent, I will remind you that we have a doctor's evaluation confirming her full mental capacity. I'll also remind you that everything she's told me has been written down, every visit, every threat, every word." His mouth snapped shut. I turned to my sister, my voice steady. "He told you I was just being difficult. That I was cruel. That it was only paperwork." Her eyes flicked to the documents on the table. Yes. He did. And to you, I said to my daughter-in-law, he said the grandchildren would suffer if I didn't help. She shifted in her chair, looking suddenly small. He did. And Janet, I said softly, he told you I was shutting him out. That I was turning my back. Janet's hands twisted in her lap. Yes. He made it sound like you were selfish. I took a deep breath, my gaze never leaving my son's face. Do you see it now? He wasn't asking. He was manipulating. He was lying to all of you, just as he was lying to me. My son's mask began to crack. His jaw worked, his fists clenched on his knees. You're making me out to be a monster, he spat. I was trying to survive. I have debts, I have responsibilities, you wouldn't understand. You're right, I said coldly. I don't understand. Because I never built my life on gambling and lies. I never tried to steal from the one person who loved me most. The room held its breath. He surged to his feet. So what now, Mom? You gonna press charges against your own son? Drag me through court? Destroy what little family we have left? I rose slowly, my eyes never leaving his. You destroyed that when you forged my name. Harriet closed her folder. Here are your options, Michael. You can walk out that door and never contact your mother about her finances again, or we can take this to the authorities. If you push one more time, even one, you will be answering to a judge, not your mother. For a long moment, he just stood there, his chest heaving, his eyes darting from face to face. He was waiting for someone, his wife, my sister, anyone, to defend him. But no one did. One by one, their eyes dropped. They saw him clearly now. His face twisted with rage. You're all against me, he muttered. Every last one of you. Fine. Don't come crawling to me when you need something. He grabbed his bag and stormed toward the door. Just before he left, I spoke one last time. Michael. He froze, his hand on the knob. I steadied my voice. I will always love the boy you were. But the man you've become? I don't know him. And I will not let him destroy me. His shoulders tensed. Then he yanked the door open and slammed it behind him, leaving only the echo of his footsteps fading into the distance. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of my sister's quiet sobs. My daughter-in-law looked pale, ashamed. Janet reached over and squeezed my hand. Harriet leaned back, her expression calm but firm. It's over, for now. But remember, he may try again. Keep everything locked down. Don't let him back in until he proves, truly proves, he's changed. I nodded slowly. My heart ached, but I also felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, clarity. The flowers, the dinners, the sweet words, they had all been illusions. Now, the truth was out in the open, where it could no longer be hidden. And though it broke me to say it, I knew this revelation was necessary. Because love without truth isn't love at all. It's just another kind of trap. That night, I sat by the window as the sun set, the house quiet again. Only this time, the silence didn't feel fragile. It felt strong. Solid. The truth had been spoken. The mask was gone. And for the first time in a long time, I could breathe. In the days that followed, the air around me felt different. Lighter somehow, though tinged with sorrow. I had spoken the truth, revealed the lies, and in doing so, I had burnt a bridge I once thought unbreakable. But bridges built on deceit aren't bridges at all. They're traps. And sometimes, the only way to survive is to watch them collapse. The family reacted quickly. My sister, who had once gently urged me to be kind to him, now looked at me with tears in her eyes. I had no idea, she whispered. I thought you were being stubborn, but you were protecting yourself all along. I'm sorry. Janet, my steadfast friend, called every day to check in. She reminded me that I wasn't alone, not anymore. Even my daughter-in-law, who had once joined his guilt campaign, grew quiet. Her calls became brief, cautious. I think, for the first time, she saw the man she had married without the rose-colored glasses. As for my son? His silence spoke volumes. At first, he stayed away. I thought maybe he'd given up. But the world has a way of revealing the truth, even without me lifting a finger. Word spread about his failed businesses. Investors pulled out. The gambling debts he had tried to bury surfaced again, this time in the form of creditors calling at his door, knocking with demands he could no longer dodge. One evening, Janet told me she saw him at the grocery store. He looked older, she said softly. Exhausted. Like the life's been drained out of him. I closed my eyes. It hurt to hear, but I didn't flinch. Actions have consequences. And the consequences didn't stop at whispers in the neighborhood. Harriet moved forward quietly, sending a warning letter through official channels, documenting his forgery and the attempted coercion. If he tries again, she explained, this becomes evidence in court. Right now, it's a shield. But it could just as easily be a sword. I asked her if I should press charges, but she shook her head. That decision will come later, if it must. For now, we've put him on notice. He knows we're watching. That night, as I sat in my kitchen, I thought about the irony. For weeks he had tried to convince me I was powerless, that I was an old woman with no choice but to give in. But here I was, stronger than ever, with the law and the truth on my side. It wasn't me who had no options. It was him. Still, victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like loss. I missed the boy he used to be, the boy who once saved his allowance to buy me a necklace from the school fair, who once held my hand crossing the street as if he were protecting me. That boy was gone, replaced by a man who saw me not as his mother, but as a vault to be cracked open. One night, I found myself standing in the hallway, staring at the old family photos still hanging on the wall. His school pictures. His graduation. His wedding. I touched the glass of one frame, my reflection overlapping his younger smile. And I whispered, "Why?" No answer came. Only silence. The days stretched into weeks, and though he didn't come back, the consequences of his choices grew heavier. A mutual acquaintance told me he'd been forced to sell his car. Another mentioned his wife had moved back in with her parents temporarily, tired of the chaos. Even the grandchildren, sweet, innocent children, felt the ripple. They asked questions their parents couldn't answer. Why can't Daddy take us out anymore? Why is everyone always angry? It broke my heart. But I reminded myself, none of this was my doing. I hadn't set this fire. I had only refused to let it spread into my home. One morning, I stepped outside to water the garden, and there he was. My son. Standing at the edge of the walkway, thinner, shadows under his eyes, his shoulders slumped. He looked at me with something between shame and resentment. "Mom," he said hoarsely. I froze, the watering can in my hand. "What do you want?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. His throat worked, as if words were too heavy to form. Finally, he said, "I lost everything." I swallowed hard. "You lost it long before this, Michael. You just refused to see it." His eyes glistened, but then hardened again. "You could have helped me. You could have saved me." My voice trembled, but I held firm. "No. I could have drowned with you. That's all. Saving you was never in my hands. It was in yours, and you threw it away." He flinched, as though struck. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. I watched until he disappeared down the street, a small figure swallowed by the distance. My tears finally fell, splashing onto the soil at my feet. That night, I wrote in my notebook again, the final entry for this chapter of our lives. He betrayed me. He tried to steal from me. He broke my trust. But I did not break. I am still standing. And that is his consequence too, to know that he could not destroy me. I closed the book, set down my pen, and for the first time in months, slept without fear. Because that's the truth about consequences. They don't always roar like thunder. Sometimes, they're quieter. A door that no longer opens. A silence that no longer bends. A mother who no longer saves her son. And sometimes, that silence is the loudest punishment of all. The storm had passed, but its echoes still lingered in the corners of my house. The silence no longer felt oppressive, it felt earned. Like a battlefield after the dust has settled. For weeks, I had lived in fear of the next knock on the door, the next phone call, the next attempt to force my hand. But now, those knocks never came. The phone was quiet. The papers were locked away. My son's shadow had retreated from my doorstep, leaving me with something I hadn't had in a long time, peace. It was strange, at first. Peace can feel empty when you've been bracing for war. I caught myself listening for footsteps that never came, rehearsing arguments I'd never need to speak. But slowly, the quiet became a comfort, like a blanket I could finally wrap around myself without fear it would be ripped away. One morning, as the sun poured golden light through my kitchen window, I brewed my tea and looked at the empty table where the flowers once stood. No wilted petals. No sour smell. Just clean wood, polished and simple. And I realized this was better. Flowers that come with strings attached aren't gifts. They're chains. And I was free of them now. I opened the back door and stepped into my garden. The roses were blooming, real ones, rooted deep in the soil I had tended with my own hands. Their scent was sweeter than any bouquet brought to me in deception. As I watered them, I whispered softly, "These are mine. No one can take them." Life didn't return to what it once was, it became something new. Friends came by more often now. Janet brought casseroles and stories. My sister sat with me on the porch, her guilt slowly melting into renewed trust. Even neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years began to wave when they saw me outside, as if they sensed something had shifted. And maybe it had. I wasn't the same woman I had been before all this. I wasn't the mother desperate for scraps of affection. I wasn't the old woman afraid of saying no. I was something harder now. Sharper. But in that hardness, I found a strength I didn't know I still had. As for my son, the silence between us stretched on. I heard rumors he was working odd jobs, that his wife had left him, that he was renting a small apartment across town. I never went to see for myself. People asked me, "Do you miss him?" And the answer was complicated. I miss the boy he once was, yes. I miss the laughter, the warmth, the promises whispered in youth. But the man he became? The one who tried to strip me of everything I had built? That man, I did not miss. That man I had buried in my heart the day I said no. Sometimes love means holding on. But sometimes, it means letting go. One evening, months later, I sat by the fire with my notebook, the one I had filled with every word, every lie, every threat. I flipped through the pages, my handwriting sharp and determined. At the end, I wrote one last line. He thought he could break me. But instead, he built me stronger. Then I closed the book and tucked it away. Not to forget, but to remember. Because forgetting would dishonor the lesson. And the lesson was this: love without respect is not love. And trust, once broken, must be guarded like a jewel. The future stretched before me, not as a shadow, but as light. I began to travel again, small trips to the seaside, visits with old friends I hadn't seen in years. I started baking for the church again, laughing with women who reminded me that life is richer when shared with people who value you. And slowly, I felt joy return. Not the fragile joy that comes from hoping someone else will change, but the solid joy of knowing I had changed myself. On the first spring morning of the new year, I stood in my garden and watched the sunrise. The sky was painted in colors no bouquet could match: soft pinks, deep oranges, golden streaks of light. I breathed in the cool air, and for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. My son had brought me flowers once, only to follow them with betrayal. But I had planted my own now, flowers that belonged only to me, that grew from my own soil, watered with my own hands. And when I looked at them, I didn't see lies. I saw survival. I saw freedom. I saw a new beginning. Because the truth is, revenge doesn't always come with fire and fury. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge is living well, standing strong, and proving that no one, not even your own child, can take away your dignity, your peace, or your will to rise again. And as the sun climbed higher, I whispered to myself, steady and certain, I am still here. And I am free.